welcome to the Dark Zone Adventure Racing Podcast. This is your host, Brian Gatens. In support of USARA and their mission of working with the American adventure racing scene, we enjoy helping out with their Checkpoint podcast. And we always make it a point to cross-post it over here on a regular feed for those who want to enjoy a listen. If you like the Checkpoint, head over to your podcast platform of choice and search for Checkpoint USARA and follow on their feed as well. We always appreciate your support. Thanks to Brent and the whole crew at USARA for doing such a good job of bringing voices and racers and race directors and experience to the table for the American and international adventure racer. So sit back and relax and enjoy this episode of The Checkpoint. And if you remember, if you keep racing, we'll keep talking.
Oh, it's a checkpoint.
Right, there's the checkpoint.
Checkpoint, you better figure something out.
I think we made a mistake at the last checkpoint.
We're coming to a checkpoint, sir.
Calling at the next checkpoint. Over.
Well, spring is here and races are starting to ramp up. Welcome back to the Checkpoint podcast, a collaboration with the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast. As you start to set your goals for the spring, some of you might be thinking about how to level up in the sport. For some of you, that might mean getting a little bit closer to completing a full course. And for some, you're starting to think about how to become more competitive at the podium level. Today's topic is about that. It's about leveling up to become a more competitive adventure racing team, something that is quite difficult to do in our sport. I'm going to be talking to Cliff White from Strong Machine Racing, who has gone on quite the journey, really going from literally the back of the pack, finishing last in his first race with his wife Kate and father Starker, to becoming one of the most successful teams in North America. Totally recognize that for some of you, becoming a podium level team is not necessarily the goal, but I think you'll find there's a lot of really great advice in here that will meet everybody where they are and help everybody achieve their goals if their basic goal is to just challenge themselves and become better at the sport. Before we turn to our conversation, a quick plug. Some of you have responded online to our recent query about topics of interest. And one of the, I think, interesting ideas that came up was that some of you would really like to hear about kind of strategy, and kind of what top teams might be doing out on the course. This is a bit of a nebulous topic, but I think a really interesting one. And we'd like to try a mailbag approach to this topic. So what I'm thinking is of inviting a top racer or two to come on and chat with me and hopefully answer specific strategic questions that you, the racing community, might have. Maybe you have a question that's about a navigational scenario. Maybe you ran into something specific in a race and you'd like to hear how more experienced racers would have done things differently. Maybe you're thinking about how to approach gear, how to approach packing, how to tackle the maps at the beginning of the race, how to approach sleep strategy. These are things we're talking about in our episodes, but I think some of you have some interesting scenarios you'd like to kind of think about from your own experiences. So if you can send me an email, some of you know how to get in touch with me directly, but you can also email info@usara.com. I'm hoping to collect a number of these kind of scenarios that we can tackle and put together this special episode for you. Okay. Now we have a couple of quick words from one of our terrific 2025 USARA regional qualifiers, and then on to my conversation with Cliff. Thanks for listening to The Checkpoint, and happy training and early season racing.
Do you love old-fashioned off-trail navigation as much as I do?
How about beautiful upstate New York, complete with remote trails and roads, picturesque beaver dams and ponds, and hopefully some perfect end of the spring season weather? Come join Emily and Chris and the rest of the Tug Hill Outfitters for the Tug Hill Extreme for 6 or 24 hours of adventure on the Tug Hill Plateau. This year's course offers teams a point-to-point route with options to cut down on the biking or skip some points on Rogaine-style trekking stages. With an impeccable reputation for fun, accessible course design with challenging navigation for the more experienced teams, this will surely be one of the more interesting races on the East Coast Circuit in 2025. Come join the fun on May 31st for your chance to qualify for the USARA National Championship in Arkansas and start summer off on a high note. All right, I'm excited to have my good friend Cliff White here from Strong Machine Adventure Racing for this month's edition of The Checkpoint. Supposed to be, the Strong Machine duo, Kate and Cliff, but, the winter illness seems like it's taking everybody out. So we just get Cliff tonight. Cliff, that's okay. You have a lot to share on your own. You've been racing for a long time as Strong Machine, directing races up in Maine for the Maine Summer Adventure Race. Why don't you take a minute for those that don't know you or your team or organization to just kind of share what you want us to know about your history with adventure racing?
Sure. Thanks, Brent, and to USARA. Unfortunately, my wife and racing partner and co-race director, Kate, couldn't be here. But the two of us started racing together in 2013 in Wisconsin, and we were complete newbies to the sport. We had kind of a rough idea of what we were getting into based off watching Eco Challenge and all the shows of that ilk that were on TV in the late 90s, early 2000s. Kate had watched with her dad. I had watched with mine. And we got into it with my dad, who lived in Rockford, Illinois at the time. The three of us kind of all on a lark, decided to sign up for a 6-hour race in Madison, Wisconsin called The Stubborn Fool, directed by Paula Waite, who is now a USARA board member and a longtime USARA race director. She puts on The Stubborn Mule as well. And we were incredibly fortunate to find a really good race director and do a race that just completely hooked us. That was, like I said, 2013. We're here in 2025 now, and our path has been a long, arduous, at times torturous climb to racing a lot, racing 3, then 6 races a year, racing at nationals, then we had some really bad advice from some friends of ours who told us to go race ITERA in Ireland. It was our first expedition race. Brent's laughing because Brent and Abby were the people who suggested that. And clearly we're really bad learners since we're going back for our 3rd ITERA this summer. So we just cannot seem to quit the pain, misery, and absolute glory of adventure racing in any of its forms. So we started expedition racing in 2016. In 2019, we were lucky enough to get on Eco Challenge ourselves and live out that dream, racing with Kate, my dad, and Michael Garrison, where the idea for Michael Garrison to take on a leadership role at USARA kind of was germinated, believe it or not. That's kind of a side story for the USARA archives at some point in the future. And then we started race directing in 2016 with an 8-hour and 3-hour race, and then broadened that to a 24-hour race and added a second race called the Wildlands Adventure Challenge, which ran for 4 years. We stopped that during COVID. It was just getting to be too much. Still run Maine Summer Adventure Race as a 24-hour, 8-hour, 3-hour race. And in 2020, right before COVID, 2019, 2020, we started our quote unquote pro team, as well as our development squad, and kind of formalized our team as Strong Machine Adventure Racing, coinciding not coincidentally with my dad's retirement from adventure racing at the age of 65. Here we are in 2025 and kind of more established as a team and race directors and kind of more settled into where we are as a team and as race directors and kind of clear idea of where we want to be and how to get there.
Great. Well, thanks for that introduction and, welcome officially to the Checkpoint. I'm excited to talk to you tonight. As I said in my intro, the topic for tonight is going to be how to actually elevate in the sport. And I'll be honest, I think one of the reasons that I reached out to you and Kate about having this conversation is, in my opinion, I think you all have achieved something that is actually quite difficult in adventure racing. I think that there are a lot of people that enter the sport. There's a lot of people that work hard to develop the skill sets. But there's a reason we don't necessarily see a lot of teams truly kind of elevating into that top echelon of the sport. And that's one of the things I want to talk with you about, because you've really had the full journey from being kind of just, as you said, like a grassroots family team, to becoming one of the most competitive teams in the United States, which I know as a fan of yours, both as people and as a team, it's been really awesome watching that journey unfold. And I just want to point out that bad advice, I think, was actually pretty good advice. You keep coming back and you've really stuck with it. So I know a little what we're talking about, I think.
Yeah, it was good advice. And that's very kind of you to say. To say we're in the upper echelon of sports still feels a little like imposter syndrome. We literally finished in last place in our first race, which was a 6-hour race. Like we started at the very bottom of the sport. And it's not easy to climb the ranks. And it's not just about ranks. I think that's a key point of this whole thing is when we did that first race, we weren't like, how do we win this race? It was, how do we not finish last? And what are we doing so wrong that we finished last? And I think that was weirdly just it takes a certain type of mentality or person to want to return to that experience.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people are just like, screw this. Like, no, thanks. I'm not ever doing that again. And certainly we've tried to bring plenty of friends in over the years to our team who have done one race and been like, nope, that's not for me. So I get it. We don't ever, have hard feelings against friends who just don't want to race with us anymore. We still are friends with all of them, but it's not for everyone. It's a very frustrating, very complicated, very multifaceted sport. And that's either love it or find your peace with it, or you hate it and get out. I think that's kind of 3 categories. And when you do have that first category, if you really love it, then you got to find out where you can go with it or where it can take you. And in that case, I mean, that's kind of 2 different answers. Where it can take you is all over the world. And that's another thing that really appealed to me is you can literally do the sport anywhere in the world and see the world by doing the sport. And I love traveling. Kate does too. And we love to experience places and people and the environment and nature all over the world. And we have through adventure racing. So in that's its own reward. Seeing how far you can take the sport. I mean, that's its own challenge. Kate and I are both very grinded out type of workers. Like we really take on challenges and we don't let it go until we've figured it out in some way. And I think you need that kind of mentality to go where we've gone in the sport, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think for a lot of folks listening to this, I think that I mean, as you said, the rankings are not what is ultimately important in this sport, and I think there's so much more to this sport, even for most of us that are actually approaching it in a more competitive manner. I'm sure that there are, I mean, the average adventure racer doesn't tend to really become a team that's seeking the podium. And so some folks might just be curious to hear about your journey. So let's go back to the beginning, and I want to tease out and kind of reflect a little bit on where you started and then kind of, how your journey unfolded, for those teams that are kind of thinking about, I'd like to try to, maybe not just finish at the back of the pack, or what does it take to get past the mid pack once you get there, et cetera. So you said you started with a 6-hour race. What was your initial skill set when you went into adventure racing, thinking about, kind of those 4 core disciplines of trekking, biking, paddling, navigating? Yeah, tell us a little bit about what your team's collective experience was with those skills.
Sure. Yeah. So originally the team was just my dad, myself, and Kate. That was it. There's the 3 of us. My dad was 60 when we started racing. So definitely not in his peak athletic shape, but he had run a 3:07 marathon in his day. He had lived in the Colombian rainforest studying the trees and the dendrites or whatever in the canopy for 2 years. So he had like survival experience and he had athletic experience. He was just a great natural athlete, swimmer. Kate ran cross country in high school. As we started dating in college, and I dragged her on a couple of hikes. We climbed Mount Katahdin in Maine, and we started getting more into the outdoors, camping. When we lived in Pennsylvania, we started doing 2 and 3 night overnight backpacks, actually covering a lot of the areas where your races in Pennsylvania have gone. So that was kind of cool to come revisit them during your races, these kind of formative outdoor trips that we had done together. And as for myself, I had a pretty varied background. I'd done a lot of outdoor stuff. I hiked the Appalachian Trail in 2005. I led a bunch of trips to kayak in Lake Superior and kayak in Alaska. And so I was a sea kayak guide and had done some hiking guiding as well. And so I felt pretty comfortable in the backcountry and, minimalist stuff, carrying heavy packs, all that. Biking, I'd done some mountain biking, but I wouldn't consider myself an expert. So that was probably my weakest discipline. But compared to Kate and Starker, I had the most experience on the team. Starker had biked around the country and through Canada. He biked all through Central America. So biking was his forte, and he knew how to take apart and put together a bike, better than anyone still to this day I've ever seen. So that was another huge strength. And yeah, I mean, the 3 of us were just in it for a lark, just for a good time. But all 3 of us, I think, are just naturally like frustrated when we're not good at something. So I think that component is, having that shared collective mindset of we want to figure this out and get better at it. Not necessarily want to beat anyone. We just want to figure out how to do better than we were doing was important when we were starting out.
What about the navigation component? Did somebody have kind of either experience there or kind of a natural mind for that?
It was a disaster.
Yeah.
It was an unmitigated disaster. The 6-hour race wasn't that bad because the only navigation in that, besides getting around the town of Madison, which we knew pretty well at that point, was an O course. So you couldn't get that lost on a very tight little map. But when we did the next race, the Stubborn Mule up in northern Wisconsin, there was a big O course. And after we had sat down and eaten our sandwiches 6 hours into the race, as you do in your 6-second ever race, right? Get your sandwiches, you have your picnic, and then you go out on the O course. We do not eat sandwiches anymore and sit down and enjoy a meal in races anymore. In case anyone wants to improve, that's a really good way to save an hour of time.
Yeah.
We went out on this trekking section and we came back 4 hours later and we had not found a single point. And we had walked around the whole course just looking for checkpoints, and we're like, where the heck are they?
Yeah.
They're not here. And we talked to Paula Waite. She was in her tent hiding from the mosquitoes in the northern Wisconsin woods. And we're like, I think you did something wrong because there's no checkpoints in your course. And she was like, she was very nice. Instead of being like, actually, you're wrong. She took the map. She's like, here, there's one on this lake. Just walk the lake until you hit the checkpoint. Like, you can't miss it if you're keeping the lake on your left. And sure enough, we did it. And we're like, holy crap, there's a checkpoint here. Like, where are the rest of them? And I think we spent 6 hours on that course, and we found one more checkpoint. It was like this revelation. We were like dancing in the woods because we found a checkpoint, and then went back, had to bike all the way to the finish, finished with like 6 checkpoints or whatever. And it was like, all right, that was another learning experience. And instead of being like, well, that's it, like this sport's impossible, we're like, there's something that other teams are doing in terms of finding these points that we are not doing. So what is that? And it was about figuring out.
Yeah. So, okay. So, well, one more question. When you went into, especially that very first race, did you have a goal? Did you have kind of a set goal for how you wanted to finish, or were you really not thinking at all about that?
No, I mean, we didn't even know how the rankings worked. Like, we had no idea what we were even doing. So it was really just about having a fun time. I mean, literally, like, we didn't bring the mandatory gear, and we got a 3 checkpoint penalty for not bringing the mandatory. It was whistles, and we were like, we brought a whistle. Why do we need 4 whistles? Right. And like, that doesn't make any sense. One of us has a whistle, and we were like arguing. And Paul's like, the rules say you need to have a whistle per person. And we're like, we're in Madison, Wisconsin. We're like, it was an urban race. We're like, why do we need a whistle for each person? But, you learn to package that away. Yeah. You can complain about that over a beer before, after the race, but during the race, you have to have all the mandatory gear. It's a lesson we learned. I think we learned every lesson the hard way. Yeah. Like, every single lesson was not learned easily. So no, to answer your question, we never had any hopes of any kind of result other than to feel like we did better than we had done the previous race.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you're describing the quintessential kind of first experiences, right? I mean, we've all been there. We, as race directors, I'm sure you've seen the same thing. I mean, I have watched every single year people come to our race, and they're new and they're kind of wide-eyed, and, some of them have pretty ambitious goals, and it's incredibly rare that, a true rookie to our sport is able to walk into this thing and actually perform. And, sometimes, like you said, it's just the lack of knowledge for how things work. It's not even about skills or ability, but then you often find that it's also about skills and ability and just the experience. So, you're describing a pretty universal experience. Okay. So, I mean, you've already alluded to this, but you had your first couple of racing experiences. They were humbling, like you said, good learning opportunities. You've made it clear that you all were kind of collectively in the same place of being people that wanted to figure it out. So, my question about, did your goals shift and such? The answer is clearly yes. You wanted to improve. What were your, how did you formulate your initial goals for improving? Were they kind of based in the rankings and results? Were they skill-based? Were they both? What did that look like in those early years?
So I am, and this is something that carries through to our team today, I am a naturally competitive person. I just can't help it. It's part of who I am. I love team sports. I had done a bunch of ultra running before getting into adventure racing. And I'd always looked at the rankings there and cared. I was a competitive cross-country runner in high school. I played every sport I could get my hands on. I just loved sports and loved competing. Never was the best at anything, just liked learning sports and competing at them. And Kate is the least competitive person I've ever met in my life. She just does not have a competitive bone in her body. She does not care. And my dad is I would say he's somewhere between the two. Um, um, but not really a natural. He doesn't know much about sports, I would say. He just really likes being outdoors, and he's just a fit human being who likes exercising. And so I think we all had different motivations when it came to the rankings. My dad, and it was kind of the middle path. And so we kind of coalesced around that, which is we're not like Rib Mountain Racing was still one of the best teams in the country, was ripping it up at the time, still does, I'm sure, in Wisconsin. And we would see them at the start, and that was it. Like they would just, they have like this bunny jumping way of running that looks effortless, and then they're just gone. And they like the tortoise and the hare wins that race. When it's Rib Mountain Racing. So we didn't see that much. But what happened was we started racing this Wisconsin race series, and you develop this cohort of people that you're constantly racing with and alongside. And that became our measuring stick of like how we're doing. Brenda Carlson, or her partner Joe, was in that group for a while in the Midwest. I'm trying to think of there's a great group of people who just race in the Midwest and Wisconsin specifically. And they know who they are. Great people. But you start to see the same faces at these races. And so you start using that as a yardstick. Like, okay, well, Brenda and Joe are there. We're a little ahead. Like we're doing better than last time. So that was how we would measure ourselves in the race. And, that's how even now racing at the top end of the field, you're still looking at the other teams around you, and you don't really know whether you're in first or fifth. You just know, okay, well, there's Wadali, and there's Rev 3, and there's Rootstock. Like we're doing pretty good. So that's how it kind of developed, is like a very personal, like fun competition. Like it was not mean spirited. It was just kind of like, let's try and beat Brenda and Joe this race. So it kind of developed out of that. And when you're at the bottom, beating anyone is kind of fun. So it came out of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you make any kind of concerted efforts to work on any of the kind of core skills and disciplines? Or was it really just kind of the weekend warrior approach of just get in some fitness and then get out there and learn through doing?
Yeah, there was no concerted effort.
Yeah.
I will say Wisconsin is a great place to start adventure racing because there were like 12 races a year there, and we were doing like 10 of them. So it's like Mary Chandler's approach. I don't need to train if I'm just always racing. Like we were just racing a lot. And by 3 years in, I remember we got to this section of Stubborn Mule, I believe, or maybe it was Stubborn Fool, and they gave us an aerial map, and there were checkpoints, and the directions were compass directions and meters. So like go on a bearing of 15 degrees for 400 meters, and there's your checkpoint. And we're like, we are so screwed. How are we going to do this? And we did it. And it was like, it was just a map of basically a green blob with checkpoints on it. And that was like a really seminal moment for me, because we figured out that we knew how to navigate. Like, oh, we did this. Like, so there were a lot of points like that. Going for hard points, not even if it wasn't the best strategy, just going for hard points sometimes was something we did to try and get better. So in these races, we were testing ourselves and trying to figure things out. But we weren't doing any like adventure race specific training for the first 4 or 5 years we raced.
And teamwork, I assume, you guys had your core. I know you had your core. So it was a little while before you started to kind of work on team, correct? Or were you kind of racing with some new people at the time as well?
Well, this is a pretty unique situation to have like your dad and my at the time girlfriend, then fiance, then wife. And literally my dad's wedding speech was about adventure racing, which is kind of cool. It was a really good way to let Kate get to know Starker, my dad, and Starker get to know Kate. Like it was, some of the most treasured memories I'll have is like those hours out in the woods. And for sure, there were like super frustrating moments where we were completely lost in the middle of the night. But it was also like, who the heck cares? Like, look at where we are. Look at what we're doing. This is ridiculous. It's pouring rain. We're covered in mosquitoes and mud. And this is my dad and my to be life partner here, like just doing this together. Like, this is awesome. So we kind of tried to keep that attitude. We had a really funny moment where like, I was generally lead navigator for the first couple of years, and then slowly Kate became lead navigator. She had a better mind for it. I was kind of helping, we kind of co-navigated, but I was more assistant navigator. And then we got so lost, and my dad was like, how hard could this be? Give me the map. And we're like, here, you take it. And it was just silent in the woods, and you could just hear literal crickets for like 5 minutes. And he's like, you better do this. I can't do this. And so like it's humbling, it's like adventure racing really does break you down and rebuild you stronger. But no, earlier you mentioned people who come into the sport as newbies and do well. That, as rare as that is, it's also like one of the most amazing things to me. Like it's as amazing as, winning an Olympic medal to me for a newbie to come into the sport and to succeed right off the bat, because there are so many facets you have to get competent at to even have a chance to do well in a race that it blows my mind when a team or someone comes into this sport off the bench, off nowhere and does well. It's crazy.
Yeah, there's a very quick shout out following the race down in Tasmania this past week. A duo called the Wonky Donkeys, who I don't know that they're new to the sport. Like I think they've done some shorter races, but it was their first multi-day race. And they went out and took third overall and won the all women's division. And it's just like, you just don't see that. It's really pretty awesome when you see that.
Amazing.
But that's true at the kind of the lower levels too. You don't really see new teams kind of doing that very often. So you're right. One final, just curiosity question. So you didn't do a lot of, focused necessarily skill prep. And I agree, like racing, if you can race every week, if your lifestyle allows for that and such, it's a terrific way to get better at this sport. And that's how a lot of us do it in our early careers, right? Before we have kids, before, life slows down on us a little bit, other things pop up, you can race every weekend, and that's great. It's perfect. Did you do any kind of like, for lack of a better term, academic study? Did you kind of like read any books? There's some books out there about adventure racing. There's certainly a lot of race reports and resources online if you poke around. Some people totally geek out on that. Some people don't. Did you go down that path?
Yeah, a little bit. I went to Amazon and bought some of the adventure racing books, but they're mostly like storytelling. Yeah. You can get one or two tidbits out of them, like on foot care, but it was mostly expedition races when those books were written, and so it wasn't super relevant to racing 24 hours or less. They were entertaining, They felt dated to me. What was really useful were those race reports. They're so useful. And I absolutely fell into the deep end of Emily Korsch's blog. I don't know if it's still up, but holy cow, that thing, she wrote the heck out of races back in the day. I think for the money, she's the best race reporter out there, and if her stuff is still up, then it's totally worth reading. So entertaining. She was racing with Alpine Shop and with Wadali a little bit, and racing at the top end of the sport. So it was like definitely a way to get into the mind of a top team, but also just seeing they struggle too. Like when we were in the back of the pack struggling, we were like, these freaking people from Rib Mountain Racing cross the line like they haven't even gotten dirty. And, just like, how do they do it? They're still smiling. Why are they smiling? But reading these race reports, you're like, no, they're struggling just as much as we are out there. They're just moving a little more efficiently or faster at times. And it's humanizing, but you also learn how the sport works. Like you see how the top teams handle these challenges, where they screw up, where they felt like they succeeded. And you also see how different race directors approach race directing and course creation and rules and maps and all that. And Emily posted tons of pictures of all the maps, which was so helpful, and how they approached, different sections and decision making and all that. Combined with, and this is something I should have mentioned earlier, racing as many different races as possible from different race directors. I feel like there's no sport that has a bigger influence from the course creator, from the race director. There's nothing similar in sports to how a race director can influence or impact or put their own fingerprint on how the sport is executed. And we were fortunate. Again, we didn't have kids. My dad was semi-retired, and we were, able to travel, ample vacation, 2 good jobs where we could move around a lot. And we did a road trip. We did the Teton Ogre in Idaho. We did the Gold Rush in California. We drove to nationals a bunch. We've been going to nationals every year except for the year of Eco Challenge since 2015. Yep. So even when we were really bad, we were still doing nationals because it was such a cool experience. Yeah. And no one out there should be intimidated to go to nationals, no matter where you are on the quote unquote pecking order of adventure racing. It's so fun as an experience, no matter, go look back at the results that Brent has laboriously put together, and you can see where we finished for those first bunch of years. Just getting a feel of different race director styles and how that impacts your race experience. And that has also in turn helped us as race directors. But I think that's such a key that's sometimes overlooked is people race their own little neck of the woods, their own races, and then they go to nationals or they get totally befuddled by it. And it's this is a different race director, different approach.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I completely agree with you. We similarly used to travel quite a bit. Didn't quite get as far as you have for some of the weekend long events, but, certainly have been all up and down the East Coast. And I think my first nationals was 2007, and I think I've missed 2 since then, and it's been awesome getting to race all these different race directors. I think that it always bums me out a little bit when I see, chatter sometimes through social media and such of people that kind of are siloed in their own communities, which is not a criticism of those communities, but you realize you're missing that opportunity of kind of branching out, and you're right. That's a great way to learn. And sometimes you realize that even if you have a wonderful time in your local community, you might be missing an opportunity to do a race that's actually a better fit for you, or that you might enjoy quite a bit more. I know starting in the Mid-Atlantic, I started with Goals Adventure Racing back when Goals was, one of the leading race directors in the nation in terms of experience and consistency. And, they put on great races, and I love them, and, always did love them. I think they always did a great job. But, when I started branching out, realizing, oh, wow, these NYRA races are just fantastic. People like Rodney and Amy directing these sensational, really creative navigation-based events. And, I popped down to Swamp Fox a couple of years in South Carolina and just thought that was great. And, I've always heard great things about the Midwest. I was, I've only really been out there once, but, I've been to Indiana a couple times, but out to race Paula's Nationals course. I'm curious, do you feel like, other than, being kind of racing against those top teams out there, and they had a really kind of deep slate of teams for a while, do you feel like you gained anything from racing and learning to race in that particular community, out of curiosity?
Yeah, I do. On the navigation side, the most obvious element is just the navigation in the Midwest is notoriously tricky. There's a million equally long, identical reentrants. And so you can spend an hour looking at each one, or you can go to the exact right one and move on. And we learned that the real hard way. Like initially we were like, oh, it's one of these reentrants. Let's just check it till we see the checkpoint. And then you'd see a team go by and just nail it and move on. You're like, how are they getting the right reentrant? Like, how are they actually figuring that out? And it made you think in a way that I don't think you would do that when you're out in Idaho and there's one 14,000 foot mountain and the checkpoint's at the top of it. You just slog up, you get the checkpoint if you can still breathe up there, and then slog down. Dealing with mosquitoes, dealing with mud, dealing with hot and cold. Midwest kind of has it all in terms of like the adventure racing experience, and really just creative course directing. Jerry Volager in Illinois put on great races, and he actually put on, I forgot to mention this, but an adventure racing camp. And there's still camps out there. I think there's one in Virginia. There's a women's camp coming up. And like as a beginner racer, it's so valuable to go to those. Jerry's was like a Friday night seminar, and then Saturday was all day learning. Robin Benincasa was there running through tips and things that she'd wisdom she'd impart on us. They did a nav clinic, and in the afternoon, we'd literally go out to an O course and they'd run us through navving on their maps. And then on Sunday was an 8-hour race. So it was a way to put it all together. And it was at a camp, it was at a YMCA camp. So you spent the whole weekend as a group. It was a really good way to meet other racers and kind of exchange tips and just get into the community. I mean, you asked about other teammates. We raced with a couple other people here and there, but no one really stuck. It's a good way to find teammates. Like we were lucky enough to have kind of a nuclear core, but if you're a solo racer looking to get into the sport, those camps are gold for finding teammates that are on your level and have the same kind of approach or interest in the sport. I think they're hard to run. Like now seeing it from the other side, like, God, that's a lot of work for not that much payoff, but the people who do it are saints because they're keeping the sport alive. And anyone who's interested, I highly recommend those camps to get a foot into the sport.
Is there a better summer race destination than the Birch Creek Valley in eastern Idaho? Within striking distance of Yellowstone National Park, Jackson Hole, and Pocatello, the Teton Ogre Adventure Race is truly a destination event. Hosted by national champion adventure racers Abby Broughton and Jason Popilski, the Teton Ogre is one of the longest-running Western regional qualifiers, and teams will have 8 or 24 hours to explore some lesser-known mountain ranges that the race directors love even more than the Tetons themselves. With high peaks, desolate valleys, and layers upon layers of incredible history, including 10,000-year-old pictographs and ghost mining towns from the 1890s, racers will be treated to a truly spectacular journey as they navigate a modified Rogaine course. Teams will marvel at the rugged terrain, considerable elevation gain, and spectacular views that might even stop the fastest teams in their tracks as they try to punch their ticket to this year's USARA National Championship in the Ozarks. Consider making the June 14th to 15th weekend your first summer vacation and bring your whole family out for a beautiful Rocky Mountain adventure.
All right, so we are, let's just say for the sake of conversation, we're up to your mid-pack days. You've kind of put in the time, you've learned by doing, you've kind of gleaned a lot from the amazing Midwest race directing and racing community. And as you kind of looked forward further, kind of assuming you were still of the mindset of trying to work hard, as you said, grind it out, figure out how to improve and, elevate past that mid-pack, which is where a lot of people stop, right? Again, to be clear, I think that there's a lot of people that are very content to be in the back of the pack all the time. And some of the best racers I know are people that are more toward the back of the pack. They don't necessarily have the speed and, to go faster or the desire to do that. And they're really just out for the journey. They're happy doing short course options and such. But
from a race director's perspective, the best racers are the ones who don't need to be rescued. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
Like that was always a priority of ours. Like, don't be a burden to the race director. That is the first bar you clear.
No, for sure. Yeah. I always like when I'm talking to volunteers overnight at a race and we're looking at some of the stragglers on the course sometimes, and people are like, are we worried about that? And I'm like, well, that team, maybe those 5 teams, I'm not at all worried. They're going to take care of themselves. And, I know that they're going to be okay and they're having a great time.
Exactly.
And then there's the cohort that, does kind of elevate into the mid pack and, they start to complete more and more of the course. What did you find once you got to that point? What were some of the challenges to really breaking through to become a more consistently competitive team, maybe both within your division, but certainly overall?
So I might say something a little controversial here, which is it's fairly easy to move from the bottom of the rung to the mid pack. Like you get basic competence and even if you move slow, if you're moving in the right direction and picking up checkpoints along the way, like that's upper mid pack, I would say. And so even with racing with a 60-plus-year-old, we found ourselves without just through our experience, just through learning how to do the sport, doing better. And then that was rewarding. But that upper echelon, like you're talking about, it's a pretty exclusive club. It's the same teams for the most part for the past 10 plus years since I've been in the sport. Some have faded out, but the ones that are up there, there's very few newcomers. It's for the past 5 years of world championships, there have been 2 50-plus-year-old world champions. That doesn't happen in many other sports. Like experience is a huge dividend in adventure racing. And even if you don't have the top end speed of like a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old, if you have the experience in adventure racing, it seems to go a very long way to keeping you in that upper echelon. And so I think that's why you see there's a very big bias towards being a veteran in the sport and why those top teams remain those top teams. You don't really see a slide back very often. And not to mention, it's very hard to get into that club. That's the hardest rung in adventure racing, I think, to go from upper mid pack to elite. And even then, there's only a few U.S. teams that can even think about brushing the top 10 at Worlds. So I'd say, we're very much a mid-pack team on the world level and hoping to do better in the future. But that's a whole other ballgame when you're talking about skills and experience. And it's one thing to do well on an 8-hour bike ride at nationals. It's another to do well on multiple 24-hour bike rides in worlds. And you're in a completely foreign climate, completely foreign food and topography maps. Like being on the world stage is a completely different ballgame. And I don't even think we need to touch on it too much unless you want to, because it's kind of national focus. But in terms of racing in the US, I think there's an opportunity here that we've kind of grasped, which is a lot of the teams that have been racing for a long time are racing less these days. And so I think as much as we've improved, we've also taken advantage of, there's kind of been a little bit of a clearing where our team would have the speed to maybe crack the top 10 5 years ago, now can start thinking about a top five or even like a top three at nationals. So for any teams that are like looking at this and they're in their 30s, I don't know if there's any teams in their 30s anymore, but 30s or 40s even, like now is a great opportunity to go for it. There's not that many sports that you can be like, I can be more competitive in my 40s and 50s than I was in my 20s and 30s in this sport.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's all true. We've talked about that as well as a team, and Abby and I have talked a fair bit about that too. And it's a sport that kind of comes in waves, and I think for most top teams, there's kind of a bit of a shelf life. I feel like it's usually kind of a handful of years, and then people tend to back off a bit. And you're right, there tends to be an opening for the next kind of handful of teams that are building up to that. And so you have to be kind of ready for those moments. I think we had that experience at nationals ourselves for a couple of years where, our team, as some people might know, was fortunate, and raced well for a few years, kind of peaked as a team, and we won a couple and, had a second place finish. But when I look at the fields, I can honestly say we took advantage of an opportunity, like you said, where, the competition wasn't quite as deep as it's been some other years. And that's kind of the nature of the sport. So I think you're right. If you work hard and you really kind of position yourself and you're ready, you can take advantage of that.
I would change one thing what you said, which is you didn't get lucky. There's no luck in winning nationals.
Just in the sense that, like, had we, for example, peaked over the last few years where nationals has been a bit deeper, and has drawn, like Bend Racing, for example, has been, kind of the elite of the United States for the last, they've always been elite, but really the last 5, 6, 7 years, kind of in the wake of Tecnu, who became AMK, disbanding and retiring essentially as a unit. Ben's kind of stepped into that role, and they weren't coming to nationals at that time. Right. So just in that sense, I think there's that kind of fortune of having that opening line up with the probably 4 to 5 year window where our team really seemed to peak in terms of our synergy and, our physical training and such. So
just giving you due credit there, right?
No, not necessary. Well, so I still, I'm not satisfied. I want to know, like, okay, so like, you get to that point, though, and it's not just about experience, right? Because, like, there are so many great teams who have so much experience and so much ability who don't break through to get to quite that level where they can go to a nationals, for example, with a realistic shot of being even in the top 10, but certainly the top 5. And you guys have achieved that. So, like, what was the barrier? What were some of those final humps to get over before you felt like that became more of a realistic thing, other than, of course, like we just talked about, opportunity?
So the nitty gritty of it is you need a team that is committed to the goals. And my dad retired after Eco Challenge. That was kind of our last fun, silly race. Kate and I had talked about it that year, and we raced Nordic Islands with this guy named Evan Morshead, who we had raced on Team New England with, and raced with Kit Vreeland that race too. She was from Vermont. We kind of looked around and we were like, okay, if we want to be more competitive, we want to race faster and harder and push ourselves more, we need other people to do it with. So we made a list. We looked at the results of the races that were in New England over a 2 or 3 year period, and we looked at the names. We knew most of them because we were putting on a race at that point. So we had, adventure racing is a small community. Got to know everyone for the most part, and we kind of made a hit list of people we wanted to invite, and we sent out an email. And we invited people to our team, Strong Machine Adventure Racing, and we offered them cool jerseys and the ability to race 3 to 7 times a year. And we would pay entry fees. And the goal wasn't like, we're putting up together a team that's going to win nationals in 5 years. The goal was, we want to be a competitive team from New England. That was the initial goal. So there was the competitive aspect in there, but it wasn't a specific, we're not like putting together the dream team to win the Olympics at the Barcelona, or the gold at the Barcelona Olympics, like it wasn't that specific. It was like, let's get these people together, see how it goes, see how they gel, see how we all work together and see what comes of it. And that's how we kind of ended up with what is now the core of Strong Machine Adventure Racing. And that was 2020, maybe 2019, 2020. And our first race was the C2C race with Glenn, myself, and Kit. And Kit's a great navigator, Glenn's a great navigator, and I just hung on to their coattails, and we were in 5th place for the first day and a half of that race. And then all of a sudden we found ourselves like in a battle of the top 2. And then like with like 12 hours left, we pulled ahead and we're like, holy crap, we're going to win this race. Like it just we never thought we were going to win a race that soon. And it was exhilarating. It was really fun. It kind of like jump started our whole project. So I think it really motivated everyone to like, oh my God, we can actually do well in this sport pretty quickly. Just getting together athletic people who know the sport, are passionate, are hungry, and have a good range of skills to actually get us to the finish line. So that was kind of the initial bargain of it all.
Did you invest more in the physical training at a certain point, or have you all continued to approach training as you always have?
It's a good question. I think it's kind of jumping ahead a little bit. Everyone was expected to be fit and show up to the start line in good shape. I think people were starting from different bases of fitness and different ranges of experience and comfort. For example, like Kate had a lot of catching up to do on the mountain bike. So did I, with technical skills to the rest of the team. Evan, Glenn, Kit, and then we had Tom and Amanda. Tom's a really good mountain biker. And the 4 of them were just exceptional bikers. Like on foot, I felt like I could go really fast. Glenn is just super fast on foot. And so everyone had their strengths and weaknesses, and it was kind of noted, but there was no formal training plan to address it. It was just kind of like, let's just show up for the first year or 2 and see how we do. And then we started this tradition of the team retreat in the winter. We get a house and we do some fun outdoor activities, family stuff, but we also set aside some time to really talk this through. Like, what did we do well? What did we do poorly? And out of that came getting a coach. Initially, we had an individual coach. Jen Seger coached several folks on our team. And more recently, we have gone with a team coach, which I think is pretty unique in adventure racing. I don't know if it's, I haven't heard of it being done too much before, but Mariko Wagner from Greener Adventure Racing. And she's raced with Safat and all the best Swedish teams. She's now our team coach, and she puts together a training plan for all of us and then specialized individual plans for several of us. And we're now training, like, I think this is the first year I've been on a formal training plan, and it's kicking my ass. It's intense, but it's also really easy because it's just, they're doing all the work of making the workout plans, and you just have to grind it out. So you're not like getting on your bike like, oh, I had a rough day at work, like I'll just do a level zone 2 workout today. It's like, no, like today is my day to go for it. Like I have an hour workout, you just, do it. And so it's a long answer to your question, but we're trying out the team approach to training with the idea of one person. She sees all our goals, our A races, and she's making a formal plan to get the 4 or 3 or whoever's on those start lines for those races in peak shape for those races on those dates.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we had a similar experience. We back in I guess it was like 2016, 2017. Abby actually started with kind of official coaching, professional coaching. Same with Jen Sager, and it was kind of a game changer for her and for some of us, myself mostly probably. I was just like, I can't keep up with this. As a racer, I was like, wait, well, I'm used to being relatively comfortable, and she's just burying all of us. And so it really kind of inspired, I think, the rest of the team to elevate their game a little bit and their training. And several folks invested in their own kind of training or, kind of learned from Abby a little bit, some of the things she was doing. And I think that was a big part of kind of our team's kind of surge, if you will, for that stretch. So, yeah, I can't. I mean, at some point, the physical training is critical, right?
So for me personally, I can only speak for myself, and I think Glenn's going through it this winter, this off season as well. Is I was always the more athletic, the fitter one. I loved running. I liked going out for exercise every day. And when Kate did that first year of Jen Seger, and we were racing on Team New England, and she was beating me up hills, yeah, like you said, it was like a double take. Like, what? Like, she's beating me? Like, it was awesome because you're like, holy crap, my wife is kicking my ass up this climb. But it was also a wake up call. Like, I can't just coast anymore. Like, I can't just train and do my own thing informally and still keep up with these guys. So,
right.
Now, last season was another kind of kick in the butt where, I tried to glide through and it really, I'm 41 now. And, I was just getting left behind and you're like, I don't want to be that guy. I'm putting in the work to try and maintain my place in the team because, when everyone's committed like that, you don't want to be the one who's not. And it's a real mind shift that you have to go through as an athletic person, as someone who's just naturally coasted on fitness, to be like, I need to put in the work and the hours in order to hold up my end of the bargain.
Yeah.
I think it's an important shift. If you want to be an elite team, you got to park the ego and you got to swallow the pill of I need to be putting in just as much work as everyone else, and I need to be as humble as everyone else. That's what gets you to the elite level, is racing as a team in every aspect of the sport, not just being like, well, I don't navigate, but I can haul you up the hill.
Right.
That's not going to work. You need to hone your navigation. You need to, if you can already pull someone up the hill, you need to put 20 more pounds of weight in your back and haul someone up the hill. You can always do more. And that coast philosophy is not a healthy one for a team.
Yeah. No, I think that's great advice too. And, I think for newer racers, recognizing, those top teams, they're good at everything. Right. And, to be clear, as you already said, but your team has become quite competitive. You and we are competing against each other kind of interchangeably right now. And then there's another level, when you're talking about the world elite and having competed against them with some frequency overseas, there's just another level to it. Right.
Crazy.
It really is. But, the further you go up the ladder, what you start to realize is you're talking about adventure athletes that really are good at everything. They're great bikers. They're great paddlers. They've got multiple people on the team that can lead navigate. They're great on their feet. They're good at bushwhacking, right? They're efficient. They're good with their gear, their mechanics. It's all of it, right?
And tough. They're so tough mentally and physically. I mean, just one story that stuck out for me was speaking with, again, Mary Chandler after Worlds in South Africa. I thought we nailed a 24-hour bike leg. And it just felt like such a great leg. Like I would say the single best leg I've ever done in an expedition race was this. This was in the middle of the race. We started at like 6 p.m. and finished the leg at 3 p.m. the next day. And we slept for an hour and a half somewhere in there, like right along the side of the road. It was the first time I just like thrown my bike down and slept immediately and then woken up and gotten right back on my bike. And it just felt so efficient and still felt so good. And they still beat us by like 8 hours on that bike ride. I'm like,
Yeah.
how? Like how?
Yeah.
And Mary's like, we literally only put our feet down at checkpoints.
Yeah.
Like there was no waste of time. And they were averaging like 23, 24 kilometers an hour for 20 hours, right?
Yeah.
60 to 20 hours. Like that's just a different level that I can't comprehend being at. I want to be there one day. Realistically, I just don't know if I could.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, obviously expedition, like we said, we probably shouldn't get in the weeds on expedition racing, but it is also interesting in longer form races when you start looking at actual moving speeds. You start to realize that, top teams are not necessarily moving as fast as you think they are, right? It's just like you said, it's efficiency. It's, and it's not just not sleeping, and knowing how to stay awake, but it really is just, they don't futz with their gear. And when they're uncomfortable, they just kind of suffer through that instead of stopping every 20 minutes to fix whatever's uncomfortable. And they're good at fueling consistently so their energy stays up. And, these are the things that really make a big difference. And I'm sure it's true for you too. Like, I mean, a lot of those things are the things that we really focus on as a team ourselves when we're racing is, look, like we, at some races we're absolutely not the fastest team, and, at some of those races we might still have a chance to do quite well or even win because we know that we can focus on efficiency and transitions and navigation and strategy and, working together as a team. And that's to some degree what separates us sometime from some teams that, are faster than us. It's just how it is.
I know we're not focusing on expedition races, but I would suggest to everyone out there, number one, it's an amazing experience on its own. But I think a lot of the skills you learn in expedition racing, you could take back to the sprint level, the overnight races, and they'll really help you out. I mean, the toughness that you get from making it through an expedition race. If you can make it through a 24-hour bike leg, an 8-hour bike leg doesn't seem that long. The fueling, like if you can fuel I struggled so much with like getting tired at 4 a.m. And, you learn how to deal with that in an expedition race because you're doing it 7 times instead of just once. The fueling, like you learn all these lessons in expedition racing you can bring back to sprint to 24-hour races, that they're transferable skills. They're not two different sports.
So I'm curious, like you guys you're in the thick of it. I think from me, with Rootstock Racing, like we still, are trying to do the best that we can, and we're still preparing for races. And I think to some degree, the pandemic actually kind of got in the way, in a way, for our team. And we came out the other side of the pandemic, and our team did what, I think all teams inevitably do is it changed. Teams evolve in this sport with frequency. For us, it was nothing insidious. I think it's just, some people went in different directions. We had, kind of at least a part-time retirement. We had someone kind of decide Joel got married and, kind of changed his priorities. We had some people with some health issues and, so our team just kind of lost some of that momentum that we had building. But I'll also say that, like, I think for me at least, I don't know if this is true for all my teammates, but becoming more competitive also has its drawbacks, in my opinion. And, having talked to a lot of top racers, like I know it can be like an added mental grind that can really change your relationship a little bit with the sport and maybe a lot with the sport. I've struggled at times going back to 2018, especially, where I really questioned, do I want to keep doing this? And some of the pressure of feeling like, well, we've done this in the past, so we have to do it again, didn't necessarily sit well with me. So we've actually, interestingly, been working pretty hard as a team, to kind of change our mental approach to the sport and in a way become less mentally competitive. That doesn't mean we're not still competitive, but we're really trying to change our relationship with competing. Curious if you guys have experienced that at all, since you have kind of made that, I'm not saying that you can't progress further. I'm not saying you're done progressing, but, you've made that full kind of progression from literally back of the pack to middle pack to a podium team to a team that finished third at nationals last year. Do you feel like any of those questions have come up or not really for you guys?
Well, it's a two-part question. Or two-part answer. The first is I don't think we've been successful for long enough to really feel any pressure yet. We definitely still have the mentality of kind of being outsiders to that league and don't really come to a start line with if we screw it up horribly, no one would be like, oh wow, that's a surprise. Like we screwed it up so many times that like we've taken the pressure off ourselves. We never like have expectations. We have hopes, and those hopes kind of get you through the middle of the night, but we don't have expectations yet. And one thing I learned from my trail running days is the harder I wanted to do well, or the more I wanted to do well, the worse I did. And the more I let it go and just ran my own race, the better I did. And I think I've heard that advice from many other people, including Jason Magnus with Bend, is like they race their own race. Obviously it's important to look around and see, how that feeds into your strategy, but you don't let it dictate, how you are feeling as a team.
Well, and imagine too, right? Like, I mean, the comparison to trail running, what can go wrong? I mean, things can go wrong. You could bust an ankle. The weather could be difficult. The trails could be muddy. You could bonk out, right? But you think about like it's actually like a relatively predictable list of things in adventure racing, especially the longer the race. I mean, but even in a 6 to 12 hour race, there could be literally a million different things that impact you during the course of the event, or even benefit another team, right? So absolutely, like you cannot focus on all those possibilities, and
But the other aspect. The other side of it, and believe me, we've experienced all those million things. So like when that's some deep truth. Like for every good race you have, you're going to have 5 that something goes wrong, and it's not your fault, or, it's nothing you could have predicted or changed, and it's just something you have to deal with. And that's adventure racing. That's also sadly life. But the other side of it is keeping a team together. And this is not an individual sport. It's not like trail running where you can just, sign up for a race and go and run it and come home. You need to get a team to the line. You need to get a team with shared goals, and even with all that, like you look at how many times has someone flown across the world and then one team member has lost their equipment and that's your race, or one teammate gets sick and that's your race, or one teammate, gets stung by a bee, and whatever it is, like there's so many factors that are uncontrollable or even outside of your personal control. If it's your teammate, like you can't do anything about that scenario. And you just have to learn how to deal with that. It's really hard for me. But it's an important life skill. And people's goals with life, with not just adventure racing, with life change. I mean, this year we have 3 people leaving our team, and Kit's racing got different race goals. Tom and Amanda have 3 young little ones at home, and it's hard for them to commit to a full schedule. And so we've had to bring new people into the team and kind of change our mindset on things. We used to race a lot. We're racing less this year. You have to adapt, and it's every season is different. People change. People, like that's the inevitable part of the sport. I'm sure, every team out there has had to deal with you think you're all on the same page, and then time happens and you're not. And you want to like adventure racing, you see people and you see into their souls in the middle of these races. And so it's hard to have that happen because you feel like you have such a shared bond and there's still so many more adventures to go on and races to race. But yeah, it's a tough lesson and you just have to adapt. And so, yeah, you again, this team retreat is helpful because you can process all this in a weekend and take the time, which is so hard to do in life, to really talk it out and be realistic about where you are and not just live in this fantasy land of like, well, we did this last year, or, well, our goal was this and it was a 5-year goal and we're in year 3. Things change. And having that adaptability is a core component of being a good adventure racer. But it's also a core component of being a good adventure race team is to kind of take those changes in stride and adapt and try and continue to build off of what you've done in the past, and while not letting it bog you down. I hope that's not too abstract.
No, I think you're articulating the heart of our sport, right? I mean, it's all about adaptation. The teams that are most successful and stick with it for a long time, they're teams that adapt. And we think about it all the time on the race course, right? Like we've alluded to. Things happen all the time and you have to change your plans and your strategies and you make mistakes and gear breaks and people get sick and, you just have to change. But I think you're right. That's true off the course as well, for sure. So no, I think that's great. All right. Final question. Race directing. Do you think race directing has helped your journey, yours and Kate, specifically, since you guys are really the ones doing most of the race directing? You sometimes have some other folks working with you, but you guys are the main summer race directors. Has it helped you become better racers?
It has helped and hurt. It helps in the fact that you learn how the other side is done and you learn the tips or the tricks that race directors do to put together a race. And so when you're a racer, you definitely get into the mindset of like, how would a race director be looking at this rather than just, sticking from the approach of what a racer is looking at with the course directions in the booklet. And even just in asking better questions before the race. So yeah, spending a lot of times on maps and in the woods with a map, just exploring places away from trails, has helped my navigation, has helped Kate's navigation. I think there's a lot that helps. When you're putting together a race, you're not training for a race. You're not racing. We give up a lot of time I don't think many of the best adventure racers are putting races on because it's a tough time to split. Unless they're full-time race directors, maybe you could do it, but it's a real hard dual personality to take on, especially because Kate and I both have full-time jobs outside of the sport. So it's a lot of different things going on, and race directing is so complicated and time consuming and stressful, and I'm sure it's not great for our racing in a lot of ways. That said, it's a good revenue generator and it helps us stay connected to the community. It helps us elevate our profile in terms of like who we are, and that opens doors in terms of race trading, like entry trading and stuff like that. It's something we do to get back to the sport. It's kind of bigger than does it help or hurt. To us, it's helping the community because there aren't that many races in New England. There weren't really any except for the two there was just one in Vermont. Well, no, there's two in Vermont when we came. So it was filling a gap. Like there's no sport without races. So for us, it's a vital part of the sport is creating this race. We had two for a while. We couldn't maintain that. So we had this one that we put our heart and souls into every year. And, that's just as much satisfaction, if not more so, than winning a race is getting to the end of a successful race where everyone's had fun and no one's gotten hurt and everyone says that was a wicked good time and we want to come back. Can't wait to come back next year. To us, that's just as satisfying as a win. It is a win in our book. And so it's just another aspect of adventure racing. So, yeah, there's good and bad when it comes to the impact as a racer. But for the sport, it's a way overall good, I think.
Well, thank you for everything you and Kate have both done as race directors and racers and members of the USARA board. It's always been a pleasure working with you, watching you guys race. And thank you for coming on and sharing an awful lot of wisdom. I think that it's a challenging journey, but you guys have pulled off something that very few teams actually do. And I can't wait to see you continue on that journey and see if you can, keep fine tuning and honing and, who knows, maybe down the road you will be standing on the podium at USARA Nationals, not in third place, but maybe second, maybe first. You never know. Keep dreaming big. And thanks again for your time tonight.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I didn't really talk about in this whole conversation was the importance of mentors. And you and Abby and your rootstock team have been such momentous change makers in our life. We would not be here without you two. I couldn't have imagine getting to where we are as racers, as race directors, as people without your guys' influence on our lives. And we treasure and value our friendship with you. And it's been just such a shining example of the best part of this sport is the friendship that we formed at Nationals in 2000 and whenever it was 13, 14 in Maryland when Nosy me and friendly Abby started a conversation that led to such a enriching and gratifying friendship. So thank you for everything you two have done for us and for the sport. If we do end up taking a step on the podium, it would be on your shoulders. So it's a goal, but it's a shared goal for all of us, right? We all cheer each other on.
Well, I think that is a good place to end. Thank you, Cliff. I think you are definitely overselling our role in your journey. I think it's largely self-created. But I actually will say, I think that it's a really wonderful point to kind of add and I think wrap up on that mentorship in our sport is so crucial. And we all, I think all of us who find ourselves successful in this sport are successful because we've had some mentor somewhere. For us, I think it was Bruce Wong and John Neely and some other folks with the Goals Adventure Racing Association. I'm sure that they had their mentors early on as well before us. And it's just the nature of it. So, for everyone out there looking to take a step forward, whether it's someone you just actively learn from, or maybe you have the opportunity to team up with somebody and really learn on the race course, which is the ultimate way to do it. Find yourself a mentor, and then when you get to the point where you all are, Strong Machine, find someone to pay it forward to if you can. A huge shout out to what you guys do with the development squad. I think you guys have really, embraced that challenge more than just about any competitive team that I know of right now in terms of really proactively structuring something where you are encouraging less experienced racers and helping them take those steps. So thank you for your work there.
Yeah, I want every race director to think about it, because our team, even adventure race team, and if you want any tips or suggestions on how to do that, it's easier than you think, and it's so satisfying and fulfilling to see, a development squad take shape and take wing, and it also helps backfill all these vacancies caused by people going out of the sport. It's a really good way to get people into the sport. And we need that in order for the sport to continue to survive and thrive. So really take people under your wing and help them up. It's such an important, we think, and we take on as such an important role to try and bring more people into the sport. And when we see other people doing that, there's so many ways you can do it. We just applaud those folks, because it's the only way this conversation happens, is to have an audience, and to have people who are trying to figure out a way into the sport.
Great. Thank you again, Cliff. Thanks for the wisdom. I hope for everyone listening, you have learned something from our conversation, and good luck on your own journeys, improving as adventure racers, whatever those goals might be.